On today's episode of the Everyday Leader podcast, I'm excited to share an interview I had with Elizabeth Hartke. She's an international business and leadership strategist and the founder of the Luminary Leadership Company and podcast. Her work focuses on elevating entrepreneurs. Specifically, she loves working with entrepreneurs who are parents and help them become powerful leaders in their business while also prioritizing their family. She has a lot of great insights she shares about leadership with us today, and excited to bring this to you, our listener.
Welcome to the Everyday Leader podcast. Leadership is a choice. Join me, Matt, and my co-hosts Drew and Tate each episode as we break down how to lead powerfully in your family, team, and organization.
Welcome to today's episode of the Everyday Leader podcast. I'm super excited to have Liz Hartke. Am I saying that right, Liz?
You got it. Yep.
Okay. Liz Hartke with us today, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about leadership and what she's up to, and excited for her to take some time out of her busy schedule to be with us today. Thanks, Liz.
Thanks for having me.
Good to have you on.
Yeah, I'm happy to be with you.
Yeah, so we always we'll share a little bit about who you are and what you're up to in a second. Before we do that, Liz, how would you define leadership, and what does that mean to you?
I've boiled it down to, first and foremost, self-awareness. You cannot step into true leadership without the ability to see where you need to elevate or grow or what you need to change. And I think that's probably one of the reasons that leadership is so elusive for a lot of people. So if I had to pick one thing, I'd say it's self-awareness first and foremost, but obviously that's the foundation. It's also a level of humility once you have that awareness to do something about it. And then obviously the courage to then act and continually act, because it's never a bench point that you just reach. It's a choice ongoing. So those are the three key components of it from my perspective.
Yeah, no, I really like that. In fact, and we often say it's kind of a word that's maybe a little bit convoluted or that's thrown around a lot in the world, and so we always like to ask what that means to our guests on the show. And yeah, I like that you started with self-awareness. I don't know if we've had anyone say that before. Why self-awareness specifically?
If you don't have that, you have too much arrogance and ego driving the train and you can't change, right? So I think it's a really hard thing, and it's why mentors are so important. It's why having peers or friends or people who are willing to reflect back to you reality, because that's just the nature of humanity. It's like we can't see our every blind spot. We're not meant to do this alone. But I think a lot of times it's easy for us to pinpoint as leaders, as we're managing teams and we're serving our clients or we're putting our thoughts out into the world. It's easy to see where other people's weak spots are, but it's hard to see our own. I think that's in anything. But once you have that awareness, you have power because you can do something with it. But I've found over the years, the leaders that I can't, like the handful of people over the last 14 plus years of doing this, that I just can't seem to budge, are the ones that either don't have the self-awareness or have so much fear around what they might see if they embrace reality, that they are like, no, just tell me the strategy. Just tell me what I have to do. They don't want to have the who do I have to become conversation. So I've found that without that, they're going to be, feet in cement from that point forward.
Yeah, there's so many things you've said that are so aligned with how we feel about leadership, and I want to dive into some of those. But before we get like too far in the leadership conversation, tell our listener a little bit about who you are, and if they don't know you, what you do.
Yeah. So I am the founder of Luminary Leadership Company. We are a business that shepherds and caters to established entrepreneurs, founders, small business owners, visionaries. For many years, we were alongside them to help them scale and grow their business, which we still help them do. But now that's a byproduct of helping them scale themselves first. We've found that after working with thousands of people now over the years, the bottleneck is always ultimately the leader themselves at some point in the process. And there's not another strategy or method or system or hire that's going to get them up out of that until they're willing and ready to just unlock themselves. We try to do everything through the angle. I know you have a little one you were just telling me about, but like we try to do everything through the angle of family. It's just like that's probably my biggest motivator. I'm pregnant with our sixth little one. We homeschool. It's mass mayhem at all times over here in the Hartke household, but it's awesome. And I've seen entrepreneurship be the vehicle to prosperity and freedom and generational change for families. And I've seen it be be the intention, but the actual impact is the complete destruction of the family, right? Marriages falling apart, parents who are doing it for their kids but barely know their kids, quality of life just devolving, health really being down the tubes. And so some point in the journey, I realized how critical it is that we have to focus on the leader first, and we have to focus on them knowing that they're not just this compartmentalized business owner where we're just like going to help them in the business world but not worry about anything else. Morally, that felt really unsound to me. So I really look at the whole picture with the leaders we work with of what are you called to do in this life? What impact are you making in your home? What do you want your kids to carry with them from you, the same way you think about how you want to impact your clients, and how do we be really strategic and intentional about how we really unlock that whole person so that you're firing on all cylinders. And we focus on the business part because that's my expertise. So we use the business as the tool to do it. And we want to help people build businesses that, bless their lives, not burden them.
Yeah. No, so good. How did what's your story, Liz? How did you get into this? How did you start working with leaders and working with business owners and entrepreneurs? Like what was that journey like for you?
I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. So my parents both owned each of their own businesses, my grandparents, aunts and uncles. And I just grew up like working in those businesses and just really being just steeped in that space of small business, sitting around the conference table coloring while my mom was meeting with a client, or going on a work call with my dad, or working in my grandfather's law office after school and high school and stuff. So I just really got to witness. It was super normal for me. I never had people in my inner circle that worked in corporate or did that life. And although they were all very successful in their own right, they were present for everything. Like, we were so blessed. My mom never missed a ball game. She's there to make us breakfast, cook us dinner, put us to bed, all the things. But she had flexibility, not freedom, through her business. So she was able to flex. But I also have pretty vivid memories being very little, getting up. We lived in a really small house, and like getting up and walking out of my bedroom to go down the hall to go use the bathroom and seeing, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., whatever it was, like the dining room light dimmed, and my mom sitting there with all her briefcase open and all her papers strewn about her, catching up on a day's work because she maybe came and on the field trip that day at school or something for me. So I had this moment early in my career. I started actually doing marketing for bar and club owners in Boston. That was I was big into marketing, and I was like, I could help these people sling more drinks and get more customers in the door. It did not take very long to realize that I didn't really want to be immersed in that world. It's a pretty unsavory world behind the scenes of those types of businesses. But I was like, man, I'm really passionate about this skill set. Like, I'm passionate about helping people grow and scale. So I took that and started consulting for businesses outside the liquor industry. And it just kind of took off. And in the early stages, like I mentioned, I was all about helping them scale and grow and the bottom line and make more money. But then I saw it coming at the expense of what mattered most, and I just couldn't stomach it anymore. And I also found that they all hired me for strategy. But then once we started having the real conversations, their struggles were more so in the mindset or leadership elements of things. So that's when we kind of pivoted more into leadership first. We still do a ton of business strategy, but the cool thing is that the byproduct of that leadership work is totally, a more thriving, profitable, growing business. So our focus is taking people out of this stage of force, like doing everything on the back of effort and hard work, into overflow, just things happening as a result of who you've become versus how do I manufacture or fight to make this happen through just on my back. But I think it all stemmed from just watching how hard my family members worked and how they did everything with such integrity and wanting more small business owners to thrive and being like, it doesn't have to be like this. So I set out on this quest to help them create more freedom through their businesses versus just that flexibility.
Oh, love that. Well, and you can tell just from what you started to share earlier about how family and business can exist together. You can hear that influence that came maybe from your childhood,
Yeah.
and those experiences you had, and yeah, it seems like that was definitely a big impact on you. Who have been the leader? Excuse me. Who have been the leaders in your life that have played a big role or big impact? Probably family, but who have been those leaders for you?
I have been absolutely so blessed that I feel like God's just kind of placed the people on my path since I was a kid, right? So my mom is an incredibly influential local business owner, and she really has shepherded me and still does to this day. Like, she's who I go to if I'm really struggling with a big moment of discernment. She's kind of like my moral compass and keeps me grounded. And I think she learned, and I also got to learn for many years. He's since passed, but from my grandfather, her father, who ran a law practice in the inner city in Lawrence, Massachusetts, which is a really impoverished area. And I worked in his office after school in high school, and I would witness him do things that just really made no sense on paper from a business perspective, but it was what he intuitively, or like from a gut perspective, knew was the right thing to do. And I would say if I had to boil down my most important business lesson, it came from him and my mom, is just always do the right thing and it will work out for your favor, right? Like, we spend so much time measuring and calculating and KPIing ourselves to death, but at the end of the day, like, did you do the right thing? And if it means taking a hit at some point, then it's worth it. I remember this one point, there was this one summer that I was working at his office, and like the people in the area, most of them didn't speak English, they spoke Spanish. So I could only pick up bits and pieces because I took high school Spanish, which meant I probably didn't pay much attention and only got the nuggets that I was forced to take. But they'd come in and they'd ask for my grandfather, and he'd come out and I'd see him pull out his checkbook and he'd write a $500 check. And then another person, like a week later, would come in, a different person, and say something, and he'd go back in his office, get his checkbook, and write a $500 check. And I'm like, I know I'm not a business expert, but I'm relatively sure the way that a business succeeds is money coming in, not just you writing checks going out. What the hell is going on, and how, like, what's happening? So he's like, well, the first guy that you saw came in, he was going through a really hard time. He went through a loss and he's having trouble finding work. So I gave him some money to help him get on his feet. And I'm sure he told a friend. And by the end of the summer, he had written thousands of dollars in personal checks. This wasn't even out of the business. And he told me finally, when I kept pushing back and pushing back, because I'm like, this doesn't make sense. This isn't how we're going to grow the business. I'm thinking I'm all smart. I'm like 16 years old trying to come up with all the ideas of how we're going to scale this thing, because I was passionate about it even back then. And he's like, Elizabeth, if 100 people come into my office and ask me for whatever, $500, and I write them all those checks, and 99 of those 100 people are taking advantage of me, but one of those people who came through my door and humbly asked me for a leg up, and I help them, and then they go out and they pay that forward, it was worth it. It was the right thing to do. And I know in my heart that was the right thing. So that was like my standard of how you run a business. So it was very hard in the business scaling space of like, how do I take that doesn't make sense on paper and weave that into my world of business strategy and scaling. And I feel like we've struck this really unique balance of how to do that and how to guide people. I've also had mentors who have turned into business partners of mine. You know, John Maxwell was my first real introduction to what I'd say is like formal leadership, like an actual concrete conversation around leadership versus just what I observed and with family members or people in my life. So I was devouring his books for years. And then a handful of years ago, I had one of my really good friends reach out, and she's like, Liz, you need to come down to Oklahoma. John's coming and speaking at the college that she was a professor at. And I was like, I'm a month postpartum with our fourth baby or third baby. I don't even remember which kid. And I'm like, there's no way. Like, I haven't slept in I don't know how long. I love John. I love his work, but I've seen him speak a bunch of times. Like, it's not worth me getting on a flight. And she just kept hounding me for the next few weeks. So I finally obliged and I flew down for 24 hours. And it was the smartest move I ever made because I ended up meeting John, and he wanted to learn more about Luminary Leadership Company. And we found that his strengths were some of my deficits and my strengths were areas where they needed to improve. So I'm very much fast forwarding the story, but he went from a mentor of mine who never knew I existed all those years to someone who's now I work really closely with him, and I'm speaking at his event in August. And he's brought me on to mentor him and his leadership team, which feels very doesn't make sense, but it's just really cool that at the right times, if you're open and if you have enough awareness or willingness to learn, I genuinely believe the right people will be placed in your path, and you'll be really, really just your life will transform if you let those mentors in and have the ones that love you well enough to have those advisory seats in your life to speak into you and lead you and guide you.
That's incredible. That's awesome to hear that you have that relationship with him. And it was funny. I've had several conversations with friends and people the last few weeks about the importance of getting into the right rooms. And it's not just about getting in the rooms, but what's the value you can offer others. Like sometimes I think we just want to get in and hope we can get something from someone. And so that's incredible to hear.
Yeah.
Well, I want to go back to some of the stuff you said at the very beginning. You talked about, and I don't know if you phrased it this way or if this is just me hearing it this way, but about almost that leadership is a choice.
Yeah.
And then also that it's something you step into. You also mentioned about being somebody before doing. And could you just unpack some of those things a little bit for our listener?
Yeah. I think the people that I tend to work with are high achieving. And if there's one thing they're not afraid of, it's hard work, right? Like you give them something to do that's a challenge, and they don't just rise to the challenge, they thrive in challenge. The problem is at some point we're all gonna, like, our business is gonna outgrow our leadership, and it's gonna require us to up level. The problem is it's painful because it's not like if someone came in and audited your podcast, Drew, and was like, oh, you need to have a better hook, or you need to have better branding on your imagery, or you need to market in this way. You're like, okay, cool, I'll do those things. That's not like a personal attack on you. But when you come to someone and you say, you know, like, you're immature in your leadership development, especially someone who's truly successful, it can feel like a personal attack. Obviously you don't have to present it in those words, but that's the premise, right? Like we're no longer talking about the strategies you're using or something external. We're talking about you. So it can hurt. Things that have helped, I think, for the clients that I work with is really trying to make sure that I create the tangible ways that they can apply these things. Because if you just present someone and make them aware of something, but then you don't give them a way out, you don't give them a ladder out of the pit, it just feels like an open can of worms. It just feels like pain, right? Like it just feels like I don't even want to try because I don't know what to do with this. So we've really been on this fight to create tangible frameworks to make leadership more concrete and tactical so that it's not just this esoteric idea that, you're like, okay, that's nice in theory, but like, what does that mean in my day to day? What do I change? What do I keep doing? What do I stop doing? Who do I hire? Like, what's happening? So I found that to help a bit. But I think the conversation has to come down to like, everyone wants to grasp at what do I do? Because it's impersonal and we're hard workers. When the question then is like, who do I need to become? I wanted to find ways to make the answers to that something tangible for people so that it doesn't just feel like exposing them without a way out. And I found that to be very effective with my clients who, get hit by the 2x4 of like, oh gosh, I didn't even realize I was doing that, or I didn't even notice I was treating my team that way, or I didn't even like recognize the patterns of my thinking that were causing me to perpetuate this problem and stay on this treadmill. It's like, great, let's figure out how do we boil this down to the action steps you can take to get out of it. So I think that's a key piece when it comes to leadership as a whole is like, you don't have to stay in the discomfort of it. You got to let it in and identify it, but then you can do something with it as tactical as if you were coming up with your next, marketing strategy for something.
Yeah. And what would you say? Well, back to this idea of like, who are you being? Not necessarily what are you doing. And there's a relationship obviously between the two. I remember the first time like talking about the concepts of being with people. It was kind of hard to grasp onto and understand because I feel like our society is do. And how quickly can that change? How quickly can you be somebody different?
Almost instantly. And that's the cool part. The problem is everyone feels like it's so far away. I am not a proponent of, and it's just not my skill set, right? Like I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist, but I've seen a lot of uh, content creators or entrepreneurs talking about, or leadership people talking about like how you have to unearth, like you have to get to the bottom of everything. And I subscribe to that for a little bit of like, oh, the reason I have these patterns is something from childhood. Now I have to go unearth this thing and I have to heal it. And there's a time and a place for that. I'm not the person to do it with you, but what I think is sometimes that makes us feel like we're a million miles away from where we want to be and who we need to become. And it slows us down from actually pursuing it because it's like, well, I'm not going to heal all my life's traumas in like a week. That's a tall order, that's 30 something years of crap that I have to figure out and unearth. And then it just deters people from taking any step. The coolest thing is when you make it tangible, when you break it down into like, being becomes there's an element of doing to being, right? It's like, okay, if I want to be that, what do I have to do? So you can embrace both worlds if you're an actionable person to make it feel less hectic. So I'll give you an example of one of the ways we do this. So one of the first things we do with our mastermind members is after we have like the vision conversation, like where are you taking the business and what do you feel called to, and tell us more about your family and what do you want, what are your rhythms to be like, not in those words, it's way more in depth, but we get the general premise. We then audit their calendar and it's a kind of painful part of the process. We actually install with their permission something on their computer, a tool we actually install because our people are like me. We're like, if I have to take an extra step, I'm not going to do it. So if you're like, Liz, track your calendar for 2 weeks, I'm like, no, because that's an extra thing I have to do. So we install something, if they would prefer to do it this way, that tracks everything for them. And the purpose of that is to see the gap between what they say they're wanting and what they're actually tangibly doing and who they're being. And do they match up? Are they on the same trajectory? Are they running in two different directions? Are they living in complete disillusionment? Most people find, oh crap, what I say I want and how I'm actually living, they're not in congruence. So it's again coming back to the awareness piece. But then what do we do about it? So we have to identify what's in the gap, right? And who do you need to become? And then what we can do is we have a process we call the Visionary CEO Schedule. And it's essentially, we've boiled it down after 14 years of studying, elite founders and leaders, of 7 blocks of time that need to exist in every entrepreneur, no matter what industry, in every entrepreneur's weekly calendar, not monthly, not necessarily daily, but weekly. And these 7 blocks need to show up if you want to go from a place of force and chaos and stress to clarity and harmony in your life and more profitability and overflow, right? Like if you want to make that pivot, if you want to get over that bridge, these blocks have to show up. And then that allows us to say some of those blocks are very much about the being. So, for example, one of the blocks is the intentional CEO block. So, the intentional CEO block is designed to be at the start of your day, and it's training you to stop being responsive and reactive as a leader, because you're not really a leader if you're being so reactive, because a leader leads, they don't respond and react. But our tendency is like jump into work and get into the tasks, respond on Slack, answer the emails, go on social media, whatever the things are, answer our team's questions. So it's starting to train you to be who you need to be by doing what you need to do. And then there are specific things that fall within that block that you should be doing. The same time, when we audit their calendar, we find that usually less than 5% of their time is spent in their sweet spot. So their zone of genius, what they're incredibly gifted at, combined with what makes them come alive, and conveniently what would help make the business way more profitable. Less than 5%, which to them is like a kick to the gut. To me is like, oh, that's great news. We just have to up that percentage. You're going to make way more money and enjoy your life more. Like this is easy. We just solved your whole life problem. So then we build in the sweet spot CEO block. That needs to grow. Like they start by just having a 2-hour block in their week, and then they get up to like an hour each day, or maybe they're aiming for a couple hours each day. My goal is I have 4 hours every day in my sweet spot CEO block, because it has proven so profitable for me. Not to mention the positive ripple effect. When you talk about becoming, when you're doing work that makes you come alive, you change on a DNA level. Like you become electric. So now you're attracting the right clients. You're showing up to meetings with confidence. You're negotiating differently. You're thinking differently. You're innovating differently. You're seeing things you couldn't see before when you're down in the weeds in the chaos, because now you're at 30,000 feet doing what you love to do with a different vantage point. So we have these blocks to make that becoming tangible so that it doesn't feel so out of control. And we found things like that are wildly effective for our leaders to help them really make that breakthrough. But I'm telling you, 1 week of that, 1 week of using the Visionary CEO Schedule and making it your own, because every industry is different, right? Like I have real estate clients, they're like, that their life looks very different than the guy that owns the $50 million HVAC company from the person who runs the online digital business. Like that's fine. You put it through your own filter. 1 week and they're like, I don't get it. My life is different. It's not just my business is firing on all cylinders, like how I show up as a parent, how I feel with my spouse, my creativity, the ideas I've come up with, the problems that I just solved in a week that I've been beating my head against the same wall for like 3 years are just behind me now. So I say that as words of hope. Like I want to be a hope dealer for anybody listening of how close you are to change, even if it feels like it's a million miles away and it's terrifying as to what it could look like, especially because most of the people I work with, they're so freaking maxed out. So they don't feel like they have the capacity to make changes because they're like, well, I have to maintain what is. I don't have time to do the things that, so it's helping them reimagine time and their energy and how they do things.
I love all that. And I think you're the first hope dealer I've ever met, Liz.
Proud hope dealer here.
No, that's so good. I had a moment of realization a few years ago where was having a ton of success in what I was doing. I was leading a large sales team, selling at a high level, doing things at what I thought were elite. And I can't remember where this came from. It might have been Hal Elrod's book, The Miracle Equation. but I think it was from that book, but talks about priorities. And I just had this realization of reading it that sometimes I say my family's my biggest priority, but if I go back and look at my calendar, my time, it's like, oh man, they're not getting any of it. And that was like such a punch to the gut for me to say, for years I've always said my family, how important they are, how much they mean to me. And I think as business owners, a lot of times what happens is we tell ourselves we're making sacrifices now to do things for our family in the future. And it's easy to just let that become your life and your identity. And so that was a huge wake up call for me that was really made me look at, okay, how do I spend my time? Like how how can I say my family is my number one priority if they get what's left over of me
Yeah.
at the end of the day? And
Yeah.
so love that you guys help people with that. That's amazing.
Yeah, and that's so common too because it has nothing to do with who you are as a person and your intentions. Like your intentions
Right.
are so pure. And one thing we really try to help people do is a lot of coaches or mentors or experts or whatever talk about intentions I'm like there's a huge difference between intention and impact, right? Like your intention, to use the example you just gave, is to build a business that creates freedom and like blesses the heck out of your family. But what's the actual weight and the impact of reality? And we have to measure that, because if we're not willing to drop the pin, like going back to the MapQuest days, if we don't put in where we started, yeah, we want the destination. But if we're not willing to put in the original address of like where we're taking off from, it doesn't spit out the directions. So we have to identify like drop the pin, where are we, so that we can map and chart the course to where we want to go. And I think it's painful because it doesn't feel I've had those same moments, Drew, like where I did it wrong for so many years, which is why I now know how to do it differently. It's not because I've been immune to this. I've screwed it up royally, but then I could say, "Oh, I don't want to screw it up anymore." So what would it look like to make a different impact now, not for someday? We don't know if we have someday. And I can speak to that very intimately. Like I almost lost my life about a year and a half ago. And literally by a miracle, a massive blood transfusion and a life-saving surgery, I'm still here. But that was one of the greatest gifts of my life because it woke me up to like, holy shit, I really don't know if I have someday. Like I could, if it all ended on that day like it was supposed to, I would have lost. I would have, because all my awesome intentions were one thing, but my impact up to that moment, no do-overs, no fixing it, no rounding the edges, no making any calls and apologizing, no nothing. The impact, what I had given my kids, what I had left my husband with, that was the impact. And it was about to the book was going to close. And had that book closed, it would have been such a travesty because I had so many awesome intentions from that moment for the next 40, 50, 60 years that would have never come to be because it was someday. You have
Yeah.
today. We have a living legacy. We don't have a someday legacy. And that is like, you want to get me going. Like that is my real quest. When it's not what they pay me for, but it's what they get, right? Like they don't know they need it. They're paying me to help them with their business or their leadership. But I refuse to let anybody that I come alongside not live into that gap and ensure and enshrine the impact they're called to make now, because it's available to you now. And I think that's the piece that most people miss is like, I'm making these sacrifices for the future. This is good. Yeah, sacrifice is good. There are sacrifices we make. It's not about perfect balance. It's not about the amount of time you give to one thing or the other, but it's about awakening to the truth of, are you living in congruence with who you say you're called to be, and what does that look like in your days? Because that's the measure of your life.
No, I love that. That's so good, Liz. No, and for me, it was, hey, I can sacrifice now, and my kids cannot ever see their dad for their entire lives, and that's not worth it. So it's like, how do you create that? And I believe it could be an and, right? I believe you can have both. You can have the success in your business, the success in your life, and create time for your family and focus on the things that, I forgot how you said it, but it makes me think of Dan Martell's Buy Back Your Time and
Yeah.
doing things that light you up.
Yeah.
And just putting your focus on, hey, what are the things that make me the most money, or that I enjoy the most in my business? Where can I delegate things? Who are the right people I can find on my team? And trusting those people so that I can show up a more present spouse or parent or friend in other areas of my life. Love that. No, this is awesome, Liz. I've loved our conversation so far. If you wouldn't mind, would you share any more just about the impact of that experience last year and the
Yeah.
takeaways from that?
Yes, sure. It was very life altering for our whole family, really. I was expecting our fifth baby, and we lost him at 17 weeks. And in his delivery, I started hemorrhaging very significantly. And we didn't know for hours that I had been internally bleeding. So by the time it was being addressed appropriately at the hospital, unfortunately, at like this little county hospital in rural Wisconsin on a Sunday morning where there was no operating team, they couldn't find a blood match for me. We were just like watching me fade away. And it got to the point where, I was losing consciousness. So what they do is they tip your bed upside down. So your head's down by the floor and your feet are up in the air to try and keep you from going out. And I pulled the OB over to the side of the bed and I was like, am I going home to my babies? And she starts crying and says, we're going to do the very best we can, but I suggest you take a moment with your husband now and just have everything in order. In other words, like there's a very low percentage that you come out of this procedure. And I ended up losing upwards of 60% of my blood volume, and around 30% is catastrophic. So I have no doubt there were many miracles that happened that day. And when I came to, I don't remember if it was like the next day in the hospital or the day after that. I don't, it was like timelines are a little fuzzy, but I just had this immense clarity that I had never had before, because leading up to that moment, we had been in a building season, a busy season, packed schedule. There's nothing that gets your butt in gear like having a due date. So like was having this baby. So I was trying to get everything done ahead of time and in the business. And then it came to a screeching halt for the first time in my career. Like out of sheer necessity, I mean, I couldn't even lift my head off the pillow. I couldn't get myself to the bathroom. I couldn't feed myself for about a month. So everything just stopped. Now, thankfully, I have an incredible team and they kept the ball rolling, but my life stopped. And I had this unique opportunity. And again, when I kind of like came back to life, really, I remember saying to my husband, like, I'm never spending another moment of my life in any area of my life doing something that I'm not called to do. Like, not just what I want to do, not just what I plan to do, but like what I am called to do. It's either for me in this life or it's not, which meant, although my calendar got totally cleared, it would have been really easy once I was feeling stronger and coming back to just start to add stuff back in like I used to. And I knew I couldn't do that. Like, I knew I had to make a major change. Enough so that, like, we had sold out a program that brings in well over 6 figures into our company that we've been running for years. And when I was really sitting with it, I'm like, this is just a low-hanging fruit thing that I do because it makes me money, and it's not what I'm called to do. So I told my team, I was like, "Refund everybody. They can keep it." It was a digital thing. So I'm like, "They can keep it. I don't wanna inconvenience them, but this is coming off of our plate and we're refunding them." And it was terrifying because I'm like, "What are we gonna do?" Like, I'm not working right now. The business is still bringing in money, but not to the degree if I were still running it, and we just refunded hundreds of thousands of dollars to clients. Well, that was a tipping point. That was the moment everything fell into alignment. The doors that started opening for us, the opportunities we had grinded for years to try and get to no avail, just were at our doorstep. The people that were championing us, the clarity I had, I was in my sweet spot almost solely because like I couldn't be on calls, I couldn't do the other stuff that I normally would be doing. It was I don't wanna sugarcoat it like it was like a rosy season. It was ugly and it was hard and it was, uh, just so humbling for us and challenging. But in terms of clarity and focus on what really matters and knowing what life's really about and how to use your time well and what I was not willing to go back to that I didn't even know was that bad. Like it's not like I was living this life that was like I was not living my values. It wasn't like that, but it was still it was the exact like shakeup that I needed to make massive change and how it has rewarded us without trying like we used to try to get rewarded, right? Like we used to try to do things to create reward, whether it be financially or recognition or whatever. It was just happening naturally. And that's kind of the premise, right? Like I was living in force and then I got to experience overflow. Um, and I want people to have that gift too without the without the catastrophic life event. Like you don't have to be like bleeding out on a hospital floor um to get this opportunity.
Well, what I love about all that too, Liz, is it's a choice how you respond to that. It's a choice to view that as a great thing that happened or a blessing despite the terrible things you had to go through. And I don't know, I think there's a lot to learn from that for our listener. You know, sometimes we have something that happens to us and we can we can choose to tell the story we want to about that to ourselves. And yeah, it just made me think through all the things in my mind that have been hard or terrible in my life, and how have I viewed those things? How have I responded to those things? And I always try to ask myself when those things are happening, what am I supposed to be learning from this? What's the good that can come from this? And sometimes it's not always quick and easy to figure that out.
Yeah.
But no, that's awesome. Thanks for going there with us and
Yeah,
sharing
happy
that.
to.
Couple questions before we wrap up, Liz. What would you say if someone we talk about that leadership isn't just a title. It's like you can be a leader where whatever your role or wherever you are in an organization. But if someone was looking to level up their leadership or they want to become a better leader, and you kind of talked about self-awareness being the first step, like what advice would you give to someone who's, hey, I'm getting into leadership and I'm trying to learn how to become a better leader. What would your advice be?
I would say just steep yourself in it. Like anytime you want to learn anything or grow in something, like build a little bit of an obsession around it if it's something worthwhile. And I would argue this will serve anyone in any field, any stage of life, in any category of life. Like it will be a gift if you embrace it. And the two ways that I do that is mentorship. Have someone you respect who's gone even just a little bit before you or a lot before you, and highly advise choosing someone who you align deeply with their values, not just their skills or their accomplishments. I've made that mistake. Um, you need someone, you look at their life, they're not perfect. They make mistakes. You know, it doesn't have to be that they are living some idyllic life, but you look at them and you're like, yeah, that's a life well lived. Like I honor and I respect how they are choosing to live their life. And then the secondary piece is the study of it, right? Like do you have the resources and the tools that you're putting in your peer review daily, right? Like because when we recognize something or study something, it just becomes more even more so in our awareness. Like we notice things more, we draw to things more. So if you want to naturally have a bent towards leadership and experience that growth, you need to consume things that support it. I cannot remember. I don't know. I don't know how long it's been. And this isn't like some like hard line that I have, but it's just how I am just designed at this juncture. I can't remember the last time I read like a fiction book. And I'm not saying this proudly. I've had mentors be like, you're like a rubber band about to snap. Go read like a good fiction book. You need to relax. So I'm not saying this is the answer, but I'm just sharing. I can't remember the last time I read a fiction book or like watched reality TV or just crap, because I've for so long now sought out things that light me up and make me want to draw closer. Or if I'm learning, like, it's not always business though, right? When we were exploring homeschool, like I was studying all the homeschool things, and I found myself following other homeschoolers and seeking mentorship in it because it was something I wanted to grow in. So I'm not saying you just have to obsess over one thing, but whatever you're consuming is what's going to become a focus for you. So those would be the two areas I'd start: is find the right mentor and start consuming what will help you understand and apply leadership in your growth.
That's awesome. Where can our listener, if they want to follow you, connect with you, where can they go?
Well, I have a little gift for your listeners since I brought it up on the show. That Visionary CEO template I'd like to just gift it to them. It's a tool I use with my mastermind members. They can either DM me on Instagram. I'm at Eliz Hartke, the word template, and I'll send it over, or they can just go to luminaryleadershipco.com/template and I'll send it. But both ways are fine. Probably DM is easier for them. And I have my podcast, which is Your Big Next, which is also the name of the book that we'll be launching, but not until the fall. And I'm also over on YouTube as well, Liz Hartke over there. And just most of the content where I go deeper on stuff is podcast and YouTube.
Well, make sure you go subscribe to Your Big Next, follow Liz on YouTube and Instagram, and we'll make sure to also post that in our show notes, the link to where they can get that template. Thank you. Well, this has been awesome, Liz. The last question we love to ask every guest before we end is, how do you want to be remembered as a leader?
It's funny. I've never done this, but I'm going to do it because it spoke to me so profoundly. So John Maxwell, he has something he wrote in one of his works that has become my barometer for how I want to be remembered and how I want to live. And my mom and my grandfather were probably the best example of this without having to even aim at it. It's just who they were. And I had kind of the humbling realization, like I could do better, but he wrote it as a prayer, but it can be relevant to anyone. It just says, Lord, as I grow older, I'd like to be known as available rather than a hard worker, compassionate more than competent, content, not driven, generous instead of rich, gentle over being powerful, a listener more than a great communicator, loving versus quick or bright, reliable, not famous, sacrificial instead of successful, self-controlled rather than exciting, thoughtful more than gifted. I want to be a foot washer. And I want that in my home with my kids. I want that in my marriage. And I want that with every person that have the privilege of coming alongside in their business or any area of their life.
Well, that's great. I think you're being that. So
thank you.
Well, thanks, Liz. Appreciate again your time today, and thanks for those who are listening to the Everyday Leader podcast. Today's the day.
Thanks for joining us on the Everyday Leader podcast. If you're ready to take your leadership journey even further, subscribe to our weekly newsletter for more insights and practical tips. And don't forget to connect with us on Instagram to stay a part of our growing community. Just follow the links in the show notes. If this episode impacted you, please help us spread the word and share the link with a friend from wherever you're listening.